Madam Deputy Speaker. I wish to speak to new clause 1, which has been tabled by the Shadow Secretary of State, where he calls for an independent commission on full fiscal autonomy. I have to say to him that there is a whiff of hypocrisy about this. He may not remember, but on June the 15th, during the committee stage, I put forward an amendment to achieve immediate full fiscal autonomy. And I was supported in that amendment in the division lobbies by the SNP and by some Conservative colleagues. And the Labour Party, on the June the 15th, if they voted with us, could have had full fiscal autonomy that night. And they chose not to do it. Now, I don't know whether they're embarrassed about that, but they now, well, the Shadow Secretary of State for Scotland is shaking his head. He says he's not embarrassed, but he's now produced an amendment to produce another talking shop, another Smith Commission on full fiscal autonomy, knocking it into the long grass. Incidentally, he says, I don't know why, that no members of Parliament or members of the other place should serve on this. And indeed, the Secretary of State shall not appoint as a member of the Commission any person who's a member of a political party. This is part of a sort of process of thinking that somehow politicians shouldn't take decisions, that it's not statesmen who decides the fate of nations, it's unelected commissions. And what will such a commission, meeting for many months, tell us what we don't know already? The fact is that full fiscal autonomy is a well-understood concept. It has the virtue of simplicity. I'm not going to repeat all the arguments I made in its favour on June the 15th, but the Labour Party could have had it. And I give this prediction that at the general election, either the Conservative Party, in their manifesto, or the Labour Party will promise full fiscal autonomy. And I believe they have to do that because otherwise we will continue to be behind the curve. Now, I was criticised by some on my side of the House for being unhelpful on June the 15th. Actually, I think I was helpful for the Conservative cause and for the Unionist cause, actually, because I think it showed to some people in Scotland that there were Unionist politicians who value the Union, who do believe in full fiscal autonomy and do believe it is the best way to stop the gradual slide towards independence. Because if we have a Scottish Parliament based on the Smith Commission, which involves highly complex procedures on tax and many other matters, which have been debated in the past, we don't need to repeat them all here, you are inevitably leading to a sense of grievance. The way to solve the grievance is to have full fiscal autonomy immediately, and the Scottish Parliament should tax the people, spend that money, and they are held responsible. And if the Scottish National Party controls the Scottish Parliament, it is held responsible by the Scottish people. And I would argue also that actually full fiscal autonomy is even more relevant and even more, the arguments have moved even more in its favour since June the 15th, following the debate that we've had on evil. What is the objection to evil by Scottish members of Parliament and by the SNP? The objection to evil is that we have the Barnett formula, and therefore they are not allowed to vote on all stages of the bill. But a bill could change English spending, and because it changes English spending, it automatically changes Scottish spending. But Scottish members of Parliament are not allowed to vote at all stages of the bill. Now, if you had full fiscal autonomy, if we did away with the Barnett formula, then there would be no need for evil, because the only reserved matters would be foreign affairs and defence. Foreign affairs and defence account for a very small proportion of total spending. I think the budget of the Foreign Office is 0.2% of GMP. DFID is 0.7%, as we know. MOD is 2%. The Foreign Office is only less than 0.2%. We hardly have any legislation. Sometimes years pass, a whole year will pass without there being any legislation on the MOD or the Foreign Office. If the Scottish Parliament had full fiscal autonomy, and therefore effectively the only legislation that affected the Scottish people was to do with foreign affairs and defence, there'd be no need for evil. And therefore this whole debate around Barnett and about evil, which is gradually in danger, I'm not saying it will, I'm not saying I don't want it to, but it will be used by our political opponents. After all, they are our political opponents. they do oppose the union, they are entitled to make what arguments they like. And they will use the debate around evil to argue against the United Kingdom. Yes.
And I do indeed remember the amendments he brought before the House in terms of full fiscal autonomy. He will also remember that the Shadow Chancellor also voted in the lobbies with the honourable gentleman and ourselves in relation to full fiscal autonomy. Would he agree with me that it might be progress indeed for the Labour Party if they follow their party leadership on this matter too?
The new Shadow Chancellor voted in our lobby, but we seem to have an interesting concept nowadays in the Labour Party. We have full freedom on the Labour Party benches, and apparently the Labour Party leader can oppose Labour Party policy on Trident and much else. And apparently, as we've just heard, the Shadow Chancellor opposes Labour Party policy on full fiscal economy. So, I mean, this is an interesting situation that we live in. So I think I've made my point. I don't believe that this is a genuine proposal from the Shadow Secretary of State. Oh, well, he's going to tell me it is. Right, OK.
I respect the Right Honourable Gentleman immensely in this place, and if he thinks back to the debate we had on June the 15th, no one in this chamber from the SNP or indeed his colleagues on the right wing of the Conservative Party believed the figures that were put forward by the Institute for Fiscal Studies, the Treasury, the Scottish Government's own figures. So it was an attempt to put some clarity into those figures so that full fiscal autonomy could be in the benefit of Scotland rather than an £8 billion black hole.
Well, I don't want to get in all the debate about black hole and the deficit and all the rest of it. And I remember that I was intervened on by the Honourable Member for East Lothian, and I said there should be transitional arrangements. I accepted that. And I made the point that this was not a right-wing Tory trap to trap the SNP. I made precisely that point. This was not a device to get rid of Barnett because we were claiming that the Scottish people get £1,600 a year more. What I said, and I precisely said it, that if we had full fiscal autonomy, if Barnett was got rid of, we should retain the United Kingdom and there should be a grant formula based on need. And if, for instance, Scotland had a particular problem, as we have in Lincolnshire with the sparsity factor in terms of education provision or with declining industries or anything, we are a United Kingdom Parliament. We are a fraternal Parliament. That's why I believe in the Union. I believe in us standing together. And if there's a need for the United Kingdom, I then called it the sort of Imperial Parliament, as it were, helping out our friends in Wales. They don't like that word, but I only use that advisedly because that was a term that was used during the debates on Irish Home Rule. And therefore it is a technical term that if our friends, for instance, in Northern Ireland or Wales or Scotland need extra help from the United Kingdom Parliament, we should give that help. But it should be based on needs, not on this automatic formula based on Barnett, which is an outmoded concept that has lived its time and also, as I've said, is very dangerous in the concept of the evil debate, the English votes for English laws. So I'm glad that the Labour Party, I'm sorry to take them to task because I respect the Honourable Gentleman, the Shadow Secretary of State, for well. I'm sorry to take them to task, but they are making some progress. And I believe that they are still behind the curve. And I don't think they're ever going to get back in front of the curve in Scotland unless they actually are bold. And I say again the point I made back in June, that whether we like it or not, we have the election system that we have. We, the unionist parties, went to the Scottish people, we based our arguments on the Smith Commission, and we only won 56 out of 59 seats in Scotland. That is a system we have, and the Honourable Gentleman for Nottingham can complain about that, but that is the parliamentary system that we live in. And we have to accept that whether we like it or not, the Smith Commission was rejected by the Scottish people. If we want to save the Union, and I am as passionate about the Union as he is, we cannot be behind the curve on this. We have to be big-hearted, we have to be bold, and I think we have to move with full fiscal autonomy and move with it now.